I hope you all enjoyed your fall break. This update is over module number 5. This module will run from October 23rd to November 3rd when your first persuasive speech assignment is due. Let's take a look at the guidelines for your first persuasive speech. The guidelines for your first persuasive speech assignment can be found on pages 89 through 92 in your workbook. It's important that you review those guidelines. The objectives of your first persuasive speech are to convince your audience to take a specific action on a solution to help solve a problem. You will use the 5 steps of Monroe's motivated sequence for your organizational pattern, and you will use effective motivational appeals, supporting material, and continue to improve upon your effective delivery skill techniques. The guidelines for the first speech are a 6 to 8 minute time limit. You must have an outline that's properly organized just like before, and you must use Monroe's motivated sequence to organize your main points. There are example outlines found on Blackboard under the course materials tab with all the other samples. The due date for this speech is Sunday, November 3rd by 11:59 p.m. And some friendly reminders. If you do not have 8 people in your audience, I do not give you a 0. I simply take off 10% of the speech grade. Also, if you have any issues with MediaShare, you are not required to use that to upload your speech. We can use YouTube as a backup. Simply save your YouTube video as an unlisted link and email me the link. Unlisted means that only people with the link can access that video. So if you don't want your video to be public for everybody to see, save it as unlisted, and then if you email it to me, only I can see the video because I have the link. Again, I don't give you 0 or take off points if you have to use YouTube. Unfortunately, MediaShare hasn't been working for everybody. Just like your previous speech, you will use a variety of supporting material to add depth and help support your argument. Just like before, you must use a minimum of 3 different sources in your speech. For example, a book, magazine, newspaper, scholarly journal, a documentary, an interview, or a website. But remember, you need to use 3 different sources. From those 3 sources, you will have 5 pieces of supporting material which you add to your speech. Our textbook in Chapter 6 defines supporting material as examples. Examples are like facts. They help explain what you're talking about. Statistics, any type of numerical data, whether it's a percentage, an actual statistic, or even a date. And then lastly, quotes. Remember that you can have testimonies from peers who know about your topic or experts who are experts in that field. For example, you might use a magazine, and in that magazine article you might find a fact and a statistic which helps support your argument. Then you might find a newspaper article on your topic where you'd find a quote and another statistic. And then maybe lastly, you'd locate a website, and in that website you would have a couple examples or facts to help support your speech. Therefore, you've used 3 different sources, and you have a total of 5 pieces of supporting material. Don't forget that you need to state your supporting material out loud, meaning 5 times in your speech you should say the research that you found. When you say your oral citations, be sure to include the following information: the source, the credibility, and the date. You must say the source name, so the name of the book, the name of the newspaper, the magazine, or the person if you quote somebody. Also, the credibility is important. If it's a quote from a person, we need to know the credibility of that person and how they're tied to your topic. Also, if you happen to say a newspaper or maybe a magazine that's not popular that everyone would know, make sure you tell us what the source is. For example, if you say, according to the Gazette, how do we know what the Gazette is? It would be more appropriate to say, according to the Gazette, a Canadian newspaper. This way we know that it is a published piece of information, that it's a newspaper, and that it comes out of Canada. And then lastly, we need to know the date of the information. So the date of the article, the date of the magazine issue, the date you interviewed the person, or the date you found the research online. Oftentimes on a website, it's hard to find a date if it's just a generic non-print website. So if you cannot find when the information was put online or when the website was last updated, you need to tell the audience you accessed the information. That way it gives the listener some idea as to when you did the research for the information. Just like we had different types of informative speeches, process and procedure, concepts, ideas, event, person, place, and objects, there are also different types of persuasive speeches. The 3 different types of persuasive speeches are fact, value, and policy. A proposition of fact persuades the audience on whether something is true or false. For example, you could persuade the audience that aliens are real, therefore trying to prove that they are factual. Or you could do a value speech which calls for you, the speaker, to make a value judgment, meaning that you decide if something is right, wrong, good, bad, better, worst, fair, or unfair. For example, you might try to argue that Toyota automobiles are the best cars on the market. Therefore, you have to prove that they are the best. Lastly, we have proposition of policy. A proposition of policy has the speaker advocate for change in a policy, procedure, or a behavior. For your first persuasive, you are required to do a policy speech. Just like for your first informative, I required you to do a procedure speech, I'm requiring everyone in class to do a policy speech, meaning they need to persuade the audience that they should or should not take action on a policy, procedure, or behavior. Policy speeches require certain organizational patterns. The organizational pattern that I'm requiring you to use is Monroe's motivated sequence. Similar to our first informative, I required everyone to use chronological. For the first persuasive, I'm requiring everyone to use an organizational pattern called Monroe's motivated sequence. The sequence includes 5 steps. That is not to be confused with 5 points. There are only actually 3 main points in the body of the speech. Please read pages 363 and 365 in the textbook so you understand the motivated sequence pattern. But let's quick look at an example so it makes more sense. The first step in Monroe's motivated sequence is the attention step. This is the introduction. It's the same as all the other introductions you have done so far this semester. You want to establish a strong attention getter to really motivate the audience on your topic. This is a great time to put in supporting material, perhaps a startling statistic or a really powerful quote about your topic to really persuade us. The second step is the need or the problem. This is point number 1. In point number 1, you need to prove to the audience that there is a problem. You need to tell us who it affects and how it affects them. You should not, by any means, tell us your solution. In essence, don't give away the goods. You have to first convince the audience there is a need and a problem before you can try and persuade us to take an action on your solution. If you give us the solution up front, we may decide too soon if we want to invest in it or not. Point number 2 should focus only on the problem at hand. Then we transition to point number 2, which is the satisfaction or the solution step. In the second main point, this is where you prove that your solution will work. You prove that it will satisfy the need or that it will solve the issue that you explained in point number 1. You also want to make sure the audience sees that there's practicality and feasibility in this solution. If the solution is too hard or too complicated for the audience, we're less likely to try and do it. Point number 3, or step number 4, is called visualization. In the visualization step, we're going to simply reinforce what we've already talked about. We want the audience to imagine actually taking action to our solution. Subpoint A talks about positive motivation. This is where you reinforce that if I follow your solution, these are all the positive outcomes. That maybe I'll save lives, I'll make a change, I'll help make a difference in my community or to the world, whatever it might be. Subpoint B is negative motivation. Negative motivation does not mean the negative effect to your solution. Don't discredit yourself. Negative motivation is a scare tactic. It's the negative appeal. If we don't do your solution, these are all of the bad outcomes. People will die. The economy will stay bad. The community will suffer. People will be hurt. So positive motivation tells us the benefits of your solution. Negative motivation tells us the negative consequences that will happen if we choose to do nothing. Lastly, step 5 is called the call to action. This is the conclusion, similar to your memorable ending. This is where you physically tell the audience what we need to do and how to do it. Where to sign up, who to call, what person in the government we need to write, do we need to sign a petition, do we need to go online and make a donation, physically show and tell the audience what they need to do and how they can take action. Lastly, let me quick explain the specific purpose and central idea report. You're going to write your specific purpose and central idea just a little bit differently than you did the informative speeches. As always, the specific purpose and central idea is due early. This is due on Sunday, October 27th by 11:59 p.m. so I can give you feedback on your speech. As a reminder, I'm always happy to review outlines, but remember, a rough draft is not graded. I will review them though if you would like feedback. I only grade the final outline that you send to me after you submit your speech. For example, for your specific purpose, let's say you choose to use blood donation. The general purpose now is to persuade. We are no longer informing. The specific purpose would read, to persuade my audience to, and then you state the action. For example, to persuade my audience to donate blood. It's that simplistic. It's a very short, concise sentence that says precisely what I hope to accomplish. The central idea is the proposition or the argument. You should take this action because, and then I mentioned the need of the benefit of the problem if it's not solved. So you should donate blood because it will help save lives. Or you should donate blood because if you don't, innocent people who are hurt will die. However you choose to word it, but the central idea is your argument. Again, the examples in the textbook are a little bit different than what we teach in the workbook. Please try and follow the workbook examples. I feel that they are more clear and they more easily explain how to write this for a persuasive speech. As always, if you have any questions or concerns about the upcoming speech assignment, please feel free to